Yesterday I was talking about how challenging it is to be around my father. Uh, Today I want to talk about how nice it is to be around my mother, which it was not always the case, but I was just noticing yesterday as we were doing some sightseeing, just how enjoyable it was to hang out with her, and just how much easier the conversation is. Also, I was thinking on the drive here about the concept of being honest, and specifically with respect to her. And she was asking me questions that I didn't necessarily want to answer, but I did answer, and I just told the truth. And in the past, I think I would have either, well, I mean, either said I don't want to talk about it, or just maybe wouldn't have said anything, or I would have said something that was maybe not direct. So, like, not really lied, but just answered the question in a way that was comfortable for me. So maybe that was my truth in the moment, but it wasn't quite as factual as the way that I answered her questions yesterday. So there was just a different quality. And this was right after I'd had that conversation with the client, who's now a former client, and had determined that, I was, not that I was moving on, but that I was honest with him about how I felt about the scenario. And so it felt good to be honest. And it does. It feels good to be honest. It feels good to answer questions honestly. And I think there are a lot of times when we just don't do that because we think it's impolite. We're afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. But somebody will ask us a direct question, and instead of answering it directly, we make up all these filters in our minds that end up perverting the answer. And so what comes out is not remotely the truth. And we think we're being helpful, but we're actually hindering the progress of the relationship, of ourselves, of humanity. We run into this in coaching all the time, because people will have a question that they want to ask, that their intuition is telling them to ask, and people will talk themselves out of asking questions, or they'll ask the question and then they'll change it by adding something onto it. We sabotage ourselves all the time by not telling the truth. I guess at the end of the day, it has to do with what the priorities are. If I'm in a situation where I know telling the truth can get me killed or put in prison, which I'm not sure I've ever been in that type of situation, but it's imaginable that I would lie to avoid getting killed or put in prison. And in that scenario, the priority is on staying alive or staying out of prison rather than telling the truth. So we have to be aware of what our priorities are. There are people who tell the truth and risk death or prison. Their priorities are different. There is freedom in telling the truth, even though it might put us in danger. It's a different feeling to tell the truth than it is to lie. Lying might keep us free from prison. Telling the truth keeps us free in a different way. I'm saying this not as a value judgment, but just as a recognition of facts and something to consider and think about.